Hi, everyone. Welcome back to my Invisible From Broken to Becoming. We will continue today on chapter 5, which starts on page 22. If you're new here, welcome on in. I would recommend that you start with video 0 in this podcast and then work your ways through videos 1 through 4. If you're here for the first time and you just want to see what this channel is all about, welcome. Come on in, squat, take a listen. To all my returning subscribers, thank you so much for the support and the love that you've been pouring into me. I truly appreciate it. So we will start this journey today, chapter 5, called The In-Between. In the year following Jerry's death, I reached for God like never before. I found a little church just down the road from my house that allowed me to just sit there in a corner, cry if I needed to, sing if I wanted to, and hear words of healing that my soul desperately longed for. I found healing in those walls, and I found God on a personal level. My hunger for Him could not be diluted by anything, and this was the start of my journey to the deepest, most meaningful relationship of my life. During my initial walk with God, I had a deep need to help others, and so I brought my little brother to Arizona and brought my brother's oldest son out from Guam as well. It was a struggle with both, but somehow there was a sense of atonement in taking on the challenge. The challenge in itself kept me focused on helping others, but also kept me from neglecting my own hurts, which in the end was detrimental to my healing, but somehow became a blessing to them both, as both found their own walk with God, or at least began their own journeys to finding Him. This was also the catalyst to me finding my purpose, bringing healing to the broken and helping others find beauty in their own ashes through their own journeys that would transform their entire world. I did not know until this very moment, as I write these words out, that this all served a purpose to me finding my purpose. I was able to see the pain in others, look beyond my own, and find the compassion needed to reach them and guide them to their own relationship with God. This is still a work in progress, but we each walk our own journeys at our own pace, and this too is a lesson in itself. I do want to pause here for just a second because I know that I speak about my journey with God and that my pathway and my purpose is to help others find God. It's really to help you discover that there is no intercession that you need from anybody else, that your prayers, no matter how small or how angry or how filled with pain or even happiness, is going to deter you from reaching the divine. Your prayers, every single one of them is important. It's about building faith that you are heard, that you are important, that you matter, and that your relationship with the divine, the Most High, however you deem to call your higher power, I choose to call my higher power God, because that's what I relate my healing to. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that's your truth, and that's okay. I'm not here to persuade you to follow some religion. I am far from religious. I don't necessarily follow organized religion. There's just something in the meaning of relationship that matters way more to me than the meaning of religion. So that's all I wanted to say before I continue. Just wanted to put that out there. Thanks for listening. So while I was still searching, I found it hard to face the real pains within my family and help them through theirs. Though my brother and sister and I had a tight bond, none of us could reach the other. Somehow, without being said, we all chose to struggle with the death of Jerry alone. I wish I were able to see outside my own pain back then and reach out to them, but I didn't. We left everything unsaid. We barely talked about the funeral, and when we did, we kept everything above the depth that we were all drowning in. It is strange how, even though we were experiencing the same tragedy, we still could not talk to each other through the sorrows that we all felt. It was as if we were protecting our pain from everyone because it was all that we each had left of our brother. It was our little treasure that none of us were willing to share. Not that I've gone through the deaths of Now that I've gone through the deaths of two brothers, I realize how tragic our silence really was for us all. Over the course of my year in Arizona, following my brother's death, I struggled to maintain the same purpose I left Guam with when he died. I struggled for the strength to help his son through his own darkness. While there, he made connections with people that kept him on a path of drug addiction, and he began to lose more of himself every day. Because I knew that his behavior was rooted in sorrow, regret, and shame, I didn't know how to bring him out of it. I didn't even know how to love him through it. I did not know how to help him overcome it, and I felt myself failing my brother by failing his son. Grief compels you to make unhealthy choices to supplement the loss. This was his journey and process, and though I knew that it would only keep him bound to that guilt and shame, I didn't know how to save him. All I could do was pray for him each night that God would keep him safe, and he did. While he struggled to maintain focus on the reason he was there, I struggled to maintain reason to keep him focused. All I could do was put him in God's hands and pray that he could find himself through all of this. I know that there is a purpose for everything. Nothing is random, and all things will come to serve a greater purpose in the end. But boy, is it a struggle to believe all of that when it's all happening. And so I closed my eyes to what was happening and gave my struggles to God each night and each morning. And somehow through this, he still gave me the ability to love this child no matter what he would do. God gave me something to focus on while I fought to hold it all together. I made some really good friends who helped me through the tough times by simply sharing their time with me. I also made my name at work and quickly became a strong leader amongst all the other leaders in our call center. It gave me a sense of purpose and value, and for that, I will be forever grateful to those who helped me realize my worth at a time when failing my brother was all I could really see. Though God was not the center of these relationships, through them, He centered me while I was shattered. Once I fulfilled my year, I headed back home to Washington, as my husband did not want to leave there for Arizona. He had his family there, his business, his home, and everything that was familiar to him. So off I went back home. The next year would end up being one of the toughest, for as we battled the banks to keep our home, struggled through the blended family matters, and still had unspoken hurts between us that we never really resolved, I returned back to our normal, but I had changed. Everything in me had changed, and we all still carried the hurts from before. The only difference was that I was now carrying grief like I had never known before. This escalated our tensions in the family. On top of all this, we were facing bankruptcy, repossession of our home and my car, restructuring of his business, and leaving the place we once called home. We ended up finding a place that seemed to be a godsend, another event where the right people at the right time were present in our hour of need. My husband found a tiny ad in a paper that neither of us barely ever read that claimed waterfront property. And although it was out of our price range, which in reality was zero, he went to meet the owners anyhow. And during his meeting with them, there was a connection, and somehow they struck a deal. Owner financing, with time for us to get on our feet first. He had found a beautiful property with old growth, a giant pond on top of 14 private acres. The owners installed a new well and moved a house onto the property for us. We lived in an RV for the first year while the home was being prepared, and this gave us much needed financial relief. All at the right time, for the right reason, with the right people. This was truly God at work for us before we even knew we would need Him. It wasn't long after we moved into the house that I received one more dreaded phone call. My aunt called me to tell me that my brother Gilbert was found dead on the side of the road, beaten to death. At that moment, my entire world and everything in it came crashing down around me. I received the call while I was driving home, and I barely made it there. As soon as I walked into the door, I collapsed into my husband's arms and I cried like I never cried before. No words, just a deep, guttural cry that took everything out of me. Somehow or another, I was able to convey what I just heard, and he just held me while I cried and cried and cried. Once I was able to compose myself, I immediately went into autopilot again. I made phone calls to everyone on Guam trying to find out if it was true. I called my mom, no answer. I called my dad, no answer. I called Gilbert's girlfriend, and she didn't even know. I called the mother of Gilbert's daughter, and she confirmed it was him. And I cried some more. Once I had cried all I could cry, I decided that I would drive the hour to my sister's house and tell her in person. She did not need another phone call to hear that Gilbert died. So I dressed myself up, got a bag of clothes to stay the night there, and my husband and I got into the car. We drove there in silence, for I had no words to express my pains, and he had no words that could console my heart. When I arrived there, it looked as if they were all preparing to retire for the night, but I knocked on the door anyhow. When she came out, I told her that Gilbert had died, and just like me, there was a moment of unbelief, and when I told her how he died, she screamed out her pain in my arms. No, not again. She wailed and sobbed, and I held her silently as her tears streamed out my pain. That was the hardest thing I ever had to do, and even now I am reliving that pain all over again. Our families just sat to the side waiting in silence. What else could they do? No one knew the depth of our grief, and even she and I could not work through it openly. So we just held each other until the silence was all we had left. Just one moment. I'm going to pause for just a second. So I tend to rationalize things when I get emotional. So I'm going to rationalize this right now. Grief is indescribable, and we were still grieving the death of Jerry when Gilbert died. You can't explain the darkness, and you can't explain the terror that you feel losing one brother after another, and nobody, no matter how close they are to you, and no matter how much they love you, can truly understand or even handle that depth of emotion. So I'm about to ugly cry. So if you know someone grieving, if you know someone at this point in your life who has lost someone or something that meant the world to them, give them grace. They'll find their footing in their own time. You can't rush it. You can't rush the process. You can't wish them to get better. You can't advise them to change their mind. You can't fix it. You just have to let them go through it and give them the grace and the love and just the safe space to feel it. Okay, I'll go back now. Now that the crying's done. Okay. Mm. From there, everything else was a blur. I could not see past my sorrow. I could not talk through my pain. I could barely function enough to talk to my mom, so I didn't. My sister made the phone call and I just sat there. Because of what the two boys and I lived through together, because we shared deep tragedies at a young age, because I cared for them during the hard times, it was like I was losing my last child to another tragic death. But it was more than that, so much more. No one outside the three of us could really know what it took to survive what we survived. And now they were both gone. and I was left alone and afraid. Afraid to breathe, afraid to talk, afraid to move, afraid to feel, afraid to think. I didn't know what to do with myself, so I just sat there. Over the next few days, we had booked our trip home. Our family came to see us to support us through another death that stole all we had left. Nothing helped. Nothing made sense. Nothing consoled me. Nothing. There was simply nothing. The two people in the world that knew me best were both gone. The two people who knew my deepest childhood traumas and the person that I became because of it were both gone. The two people who knew how to reach me through thought alone were both gone. My partners in life, my confidants, my ride or die people were both gone. My heart wasn't just broken, it was shattered into a million pieces, brought to dust, and scattered into the raging winds. Gone. When we arrived on Guam, Gil wasn't there to pick us up, and our rock was now gone away. He held us together when Jerry died. He kept me focused on the here and now he was no longer here, and I just couldn't focus. I felt myself slipping away into the darkness, and I didn't even care. I remember nothing of the flight. I remember nothing of my arrival back on Guam. I remember nothing. It's as if I blocked out everything so I could make myself believe it wasn't happening again. We were still grieving losing Jerry, and now Gil. What else? Why again? What was happening? I wasn't the strong one this time around, and I didn't care to be. This was the start of my journey into the darkness that I would fight over the next 3 years. I stopped praying. I stopped calling to God. I just did not care. Although I sang Amazing Grace at his rosary, that was all I could muster, and I did it for Gilbert, period. All the time, at that time, the only grace I could see in my life and my circumstances was that I was able to stay with his girlfriend and their new baby. His baby became my focus. She became my rock. She became my comfort, and that was all that mattered. She was the spitting image of Gilbert, and I loved her all the more because of it. Even at her age of 4 months old, he had his attitude and his demeanor and his smile. I needed her more than she will ever know. I just needed to be near her, for I could see him in her, and I needed to see him to get me through his death. The next chapter is going to be called The Path to Healing. It is going to start on page 28 the next time that we do return for the Vidable. I do apologize. I got emotional through the recording of this, but hopefully it'll show you how real the story is and then as we get closer to the end of the book, it'll show you just how much is changed. So go back if you haven't and watch video 0. It is an explanation on what this channel truly is about. It's not just about me reading through the tragic deaths of my 2 brothers, but it is about how I found a light within, how I discovered my purpose, and how for the first time ever in my life, I found a strength I never knew I had. So until next time, take care and always choose happy. Toodles.